This was an uphill climb from the very beginning. I was in the development of the script for 5.5 years. We went through 9 writers, at least 25 different screenplays.
The original script that we were handed had been through several permutations. It had been in the hands of another director for a while.
Picture this. You're watching Harrison Ford run through Chicago, thinking you're seeing movie magic. But what if I told you that every drop of blood, every stumble, every gasp of pain was 100% real? What if the conspiracy in this movie accidentally exposed an actual government cover-up that people died trying to hide? I'm about to reveal 20 facts about The Fugitive that will completely shatter your reality. And trust me, fact number 1 is so explosive, so unbelievable, that it involves real federal agents, real deaths, and a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government. You're not ready for what I'm about to tell you. Fact 20. A movie graveyard hidden in plain sight. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Right now, as you're watching this, there's a twisted pile of metal rusting away in the North Carolina wilderness. It's been there for 30 years, slowly decaying like some forgotten monument to Hollywood madness. What is it? The actual train wreckage from that iconic crash scene. Yeah, you heard me right. They didn't clean it up, they just left it there. But here's where it gets weird. This wasn't some tiny model train they crashed for the cameras. We're talking about a real locomotive, tons of steel and metal, deliberately slammed into a real prison bus at full speed. The impact was so violent, so destructive, that pieces of debris scattered across acres of wilderness. And the cleanup cost, allegedly, more than the entire stunt budget. So the studio made a choice that sounds like something out of a horror movie. They abandoned it, left this twisted graveyard of metal to rot in the forest, where movie fans now make pilgrimages to see the carnage firsthand. But if you think leaving train wreckage in the woods is crazy, wait until you hear what Harrison Ford did to his own body. Fact 19. The actor who bled for his art. Harrison Ford is tough, but what he did during filming crosses the line from dedication into pure insanity. During the forest scenes, Ford tore ligaments in his leg. We're talking about genuine tissue damage, the kind that requires immediate surgery and months of recovery. What was Ford's response? Keep the cameras rolling. He didn't just refuse medical treatment, he weaponized his injury. Ford realized that a real limp would make his fugitive character more authentic, more desperate. So he made a decision that would haunt every step he took for the rest of filming. Picture this. A 50-year-old man running through forests, jumping over fences, scrambling down rocky hillsides, all on torn ligaments that should have put him in a hospital bed. Every stumble you see on screen, every pained expression, every labored breath, that's not acting, that's genuine agony captured on film. The insurance company went ballistic when they found out. Doctors begged him to stop, but Ford kept pushing his damaged body to the limit, bleeding through bandages between takes. And when you see what happened at that dam, you'll understand just how far his dangerous obsession with authenticity would go. Fact 18. When Hollywood hijacked a real crime scene. The opening crime scene shots weren't filmed on a backlot. They used actual murder locations in Chicago, places where real people had died violently. The production allegedly coordinated with active homicide detectives to avoid contaminating ongoing investigations. Eagle-eyed viewers have spotted real police tape in background shots that belonged to actual crimes still under investigation. Crew members whispered about feeling genuinely unsettled filming where people had recently been killed. That eerie authenticity you feel in those scenes? Now you know why it felt so disturbingly real. Speaking of disturbing reality, wait until you hear how they crashed an entire city's celebration. Fact 17. The day they hijacked St. Patrick's Day. March 17th, 1993, thousands of Chicago families gathered for the annual St. Patrick's Day parade, expecting a fun celebration. What they got was mass chaos when Harrison Ford suddenly burst through the crowd, being chased by cameras and crew. No permits, no crowd control, no warning to the families with children who thought they were witnessing an actual fugitive manhunt. The parade footage shows real confusion and panic. Parents grabbing their kids, elderly people stumbling to get out of the way, genuine fear on faces as this wild-eyed man in torn clothes came sprinting through their peaceful celebration. Mayor Richard Daley was literally caught on camera looking bewildered as his own parade turned into a movie set without his permission. Security footage from that day allegedly shows parade goers calling 911, genuinely believing they were witnessing an actual police chase. The mayor's office was furious when they discovered later that their city's biggest celebration had been turned into an unauthorized film shoot. But the real chaos was happening behind the scenes, where the two leading men were engaged in their own private war. Fact 16. The co-stars who genuinely hated each other. That tension between Richard Kimball and Deputy U.S. Marshal Samuel Girard. The way Tommy Lee Jones delivers every line with barely contained hostility. That wasn't acting. That was real animosity, bleeding through the screen. Ford and Jones allegedly couldn't stand each other from day one. Their working relationship was so toxic that crew members described the set as a war zone whenever both actors were present. Screaming matches between takes became so common that production assistants learned to clear out when they saw both men approaching the same area. The famous "I don't care" line that Girard delivers with such cold indifference? Industry insiders claim that was Jones taking a direct shot at Ford's notorious perfectionism and control freak tendencies on set. Every interaction between them crackles with genuine resentment. It got so bad that they had to use body doubles and creative editing for many of their shared scenes. The two men who were supposed to be creating movie magic together could barely be in the same room without security standing by to prevent things from getting physical. And when Ford decided to do that insane dam stunt himself, some whisper that Jones was secretly hoping the stubborn perfectionist would finally learn his lesson the hard way. Fact 15. The stunt that nearly killed a Hollywood legend. The Chihuahua Dam in North Carolina. 103 feet of concrete barrier between Harrison Ford and almost certain death. Every sane person involved in the production begged him not to jump. The stunt coordinators said no. The insurance company threatened to shut down filming. Ford jumped anyway. At 50 years old, with torn ligaments, in freezing water that could stop a man's heart from shock alone. The current was stronger than anyone calculated. Ford disappeared beneath the churning water and didn't surface. 10 seconds passed. 20, 30. Professional divers were already in the water, desperately searching for Hollywood's biggest action star, who might have just killed himself for a movie shot. When Ford finally broke the surface, gasping and blue from hypothermia, the entire crew erupted in shocked relief. But Ford, shivering uncontrollably and barely able to speak, had only one thing to say: "Did we get the shot?" That's the level of dangerous obsession we're dealing with here, and it makes you wonder, what else were they willing to risk for this movie? The answer involves real patients in real hospitals facing real medical emergencies. Fact 14. When movie magic met medical reality. Those hospital scenes that felt so authentic, there's a reason for that disturbing realism. They weren't filmed on sets with hired extras. The production used active emergency rooms during real shifts, with genuine patients being treated for actual life-threatening conditions. Picture this. You're having a heart attack, you're rushed to the ER, and suddenly there are cameras capturing your genuine medical crisis for a Hollywood movie. Several patients signed waivers while literally being treated for emergencies, agreeing to let their real suffering become entertainment. But it gets more unsettling. During one particularly intense hospital scene, crew members realized that one of the extras wasn't acting at all. He was having an actual cardiac event. The frantic medical staff you see rushing past Ford in one scene, they were real doctors and nurses responding to a genuine code blue emergency. The line between reality and fiction became so blurred that some audience members reported feeling genuinely disturbed by how real the hospital scenes looked. Now you know why, because parts of them actually were real medical emergencies captured on film. And if you think using real patients for movie scenes is ethically questionable, wait until you hear what they did with actual prison inmates. Fact 13. The prisoners who became human crash test dummies. Remember that terrifying prison bus scene? The convicts chained together when the vehicle gets destroyed by a freight train? Those weren't actors in costumes playing prisoners, they were real inmates who volunteered to be in the movie. Real convicts, in a real bus, during a real crash sequence that went horribly wrong. When that massive train slammed into the prison transport, several inmates suffered genuine injuries that definitely weren't in the script. broken ribs, concussions, lacerations from flying debris. These men experienced real trauma while chained inside a vehicle being destroyed for entertainment. Prison medical records from that day allegedly show multiple injury reports filed by inmates who required actual medical treatment after filming. Years later, some of these prisoners sued the production company, claiming they were essentially used as human crash test dummies without proper safety protocols. The irony is devastating. Real prisoners, many serving time for crimes they may or may not have committed, being put in genuine danger to create a movie about an innocent man wrongly imprisoned. The moral implications are staggering, but the ethical boundaries would be pushed even further when they decided to give an actor a fake limb to hide his real amputation. Fact 12. The prosthetic deception that fooled everyone. The actor playing Frederick Sykes, the one-armed man, actually was a real amputee. But here's the twisted part. They gave him a prosthetic arm for most scenes, then had him remove it for the dramatic reveals. The horror on other actors' faces when they see his missing arm, that wasn't scripted reaction to movie makeup. That was genuine shock from cast members who had no idea they'd been working alongside a real amputee disguised with prosthetics. The studio allegedly worried audiences would find his real amputation too disturbing and considered CGI instead. They wanted authentic disability, but were afraid of actual disability. And speaking of hidden realities, the underground chase scenes revealed a darkness beneath Chicago most people never knew existed. Fact 11. The underground world they accidentally documented. Those tunnel scenes weren't filmed on sound stages. They used real abandoned subway tunnels beneath Chicago, and the shadowy figures in the background weren't extras. Many were actual homeless people living there. The production paid these real homeless individuals to appear in scenes, but when filming wrapped, several refused to leave. They'd grown attached to the crew, who had shown them more kindness than they'd received from society in years. Urban explorers claim you can still find abandoned movie equipment in those tunnels that the crew couldn't retrieve because the homeless community wouldn't allow them back. And the exploitation was about to get even more dangerous when they took to the skies. Fact 10. The aerial chase that broke federal law. That breathtaking helicopter pursuit through downtown Chicago's skyline wasn't just dangerous filmmaking, it was allegedly criminal. The pilots violated multiple FAA regulations, flying closer to buildings than legally permitted, invading restricted government airspace, and maintaining altitudes that put thousands of civilians at risk. Federal investigators opened a case after the movie's release. The evidence was right there on screen. Undeniable proof of aviation violations captured in stunning detail for all the world to see. The helicopter sequence that thrilled audiences was the same footage that aviation authorities used to build their case against the production. Every breathtaking moment of aerial cinematography was potentially criminal evidence. Rumor has it the studio paid massive unreported fines to federal agencies to make the investigation disappear quietly. Some aviation watchdogs claim the case was never officially closed, just buried deep in bureaucratic files where it wouldn't embarrass Hollywood or the government agencies that allowed it to happen. But if you think breaking federal aviation law was reckless, wait until you hear about the explosion that nearly killed the movie's biggest star. Fact 9. The hotel blast that went horribly wrong. The hotel room explosion scene that looks so perfectly controlled and cinematic, it was actually a disaster that nearly killed Harrison Ford and shut down the entire production. The demolition experts calculated the explosive charges to create a dramatic but safe blast for the cameras. But something went catastrophically wrong. The explosion was 3 times more powerful than planned, turning what should have been a controlled effect into a genuine life-threatening emergency. Ford was standing closer to the blast than safety protocols allowed, and when those charges detonated with unexpected force, he suffered real burns on his back and arms. The terror you see in his eyes during that scene isn't acting, it's a man who genuinely thought he was about to die. Fire department records from that day allegedly show a real emergency response to the hotel, with actual firefighters and paramedics treating real injuries caused by an out-of-control movie stunt. The production tried to downplay the incident, but first responders don't lie in their official reports. That scene where Ford looks genuinely shaken and traumatized, he was. He'd just survived a near-death experience that wasn't supposed to happen. And the pattern of real danger, masquerading as movie magic, was about to get even more disturbing. Fact 8. The conspiracy plot based on classified reality. Here's where fiction and reality merge in the most chilling way possible. The pharmaceutical conspiracy at the heart of the Fugitive's plot wasn't created from the screenwriter's imagination. It was based on actual classified FBI cases involving real drug companies covering up deadly trial results. Federal agents provided the writers with details from sealed investigations into pharmaceutical companies that had buried safety data while people died from drugs they knew were dangerous. The corporate malfeasance you see in the movie allegedly mirrors real cases that were still under federal investigation when the film was made. Government watchdogs claim that certain scenes had to be edited because they too closely resembled ongoing federal cases. The truth wasn't just stranger than fiction. The truth was so dangerous that it had to be disguised as fiction to avoid compromising real prosecutions. Think about that. Real people died while real companies covered up real dangers, and the only way to tell that story was to pretend it was fake. The movie became a form of whistleblowing disguised as entertainment. But the real-world law-breaking wasn't limited to pharmaceutical companies. It extended to the movie production itself. Fact 7. The Great Ambulance Heist of 1993. Multiple ambulances used in chase sequences were allegedly borrowed without authorization from Chicago's emergency services. City records show several emergency vehicles went missing during filming, returned later with significant damage. Real ambulances that should have been saving lives were used for dangerous stunts while actual medical emergencies went unanswered elsewhere in the city. One ambulance allegedly crashed during an unfilmed sequence, injuring 2 crew members, an incident covered up to avoid production delays. Lives may have been lost so that a movie could be made. And the exploitation of real institutions was about to reach into the halls of justice itself. Fact 6. When real judges became unwitting actors. Those courtroom scenes that felt so authentic, there's a disturbing reason for that realism. The production used actual Chicago courtrooms during real court sessions, with genuine judges, lawyers, and defendants who had no idea they were becoming part of a Hollywood movie. Real legal proceedings were happening in the background while cameras rolled. Actual defendants were being sentenced. Real lawyers were arguing real cases, and genuine judges were making decisions that would affect real lives, all while unknowingly serving as unpaid extras in a commercial film. Court records allegedly show disruptions to actual trials when filming equipment malfunctioned during real hearings. Some defense lawyers later complained that their clients' cases were compromised because movie production interfered with legal proceedings. Imagine discovering that your real trial, your actual freedom, your genuine legal crisis had been used as atmospheric background for a Hollywood entertainment product. The violation of justice and privacy is almost unthinkable. But even that pales in comparison to the pharmaceutical facility that unwittingly helped expose their own crimes. Fact 5. The company that filmed its own downfall. The pharmaceutical company scenes were shot at a real facility that was under active federal investigation for the exact type of fraud depicted in the movie. The company allowed filming to improve their public image, having no idea that the movie would essentially expose practices identical to their real violations. Federal prosecutors allegedly ended up using actual footage from the movie as evidence in their case against the company. The irony is almost too perfect. A real pharmaceutical company helped create a movie about pharmaceutical fraud, accidentally documenting their own criminal behavior in the process. Life imitating art, imitating life in the most twisted way possible. The movie that was meant to be fiction became evidence in a real federal prosecution. The company that thought they were getting positive publicity instead created the evidence that would help convict them. The executives who approved the filming had no idea they were handing prosecutors a beautifully shot documentary of their own crimes. Reality and fiction merged so completely that the movie became a confession. But all of this institutional corruption and exploitation was overshadowed by what allegedly happened to the movie's biggest star during filming. Fact 4. The heart attack. They covered up. Here's something the studio desperately tried to hide. Harrison Ford allegedly suffered a minor heart attack during the intensive chase sequences. The physical demands of running through Chicago on torn ligaments, combined with the stress of performing dangerous stunts at age 50, reportedly caused cardiac distress that required emergency medical intervention. Paramedics were called to set, but the incident was immediately classified and hushed up. Ford was supposedly back on set within hours against explicit doctor's orders, because shutting down production would have cost millions. Medical records from that day are allegedly sealed under non-disclosure agreements that expired decades in the future. The insurance company reportedly went into crisis mode, calculating whether Ford's potential death would cost more than the movie's completion. Think about that calculation. A man's life weighed against a movie's profit margin, and Ford himself allegedly willing to risk death rather than disappoint audiences or cost the studio money. The level of dedication crosses from admirable into genuinely disturbing territory. But even Ford's near-death experience pales in comparison to the real tragedy that inspired this fictional story. And Fact 3. The real fugitive's tragic end. Dr. Sam Shepard, the real man whose wrongful conviction inspired The Fugitive, was contacted during the movie's production. This wasn't just loose inspiration. Shepard's actual case provided the template for Ford's character's nightmare. The man who had spent years fighting to clear his name after being wrongly convicted of murdering his wife was allegedly promised consulting fees and recognition that he never received. Hollywood was about to make millions from his real suffering while he remained broke and broken. Shepard died before the movie's release, never seeing the fictional version of his tragedy become a massive commercial success. His family claims he was devastated that his real pain was being turned into entertainment, while he got nothing but more years of poverty and public humiliation. The real story was actually more horrifying than the movie version. Shepard's life was destroyed not just by wrongful conviction, but by a media circus that turned his genuine tragedy into public entertainment decades before Hollywood got involved. The pattern was already there: real suffering converted into profitable fiction, while the actual victims got nothing but more pain. But even Shepard's tragic story doesn't compare to the deaths that allegedly occurred during the movie's production. Fact 2. The body count. They buried... Here's the truth. They never wanted you to know. Multiple people allegedly died during the production of The Fugitive, and every single death was covered up to protect the movie's image and box office potential. A stunt coordinator allegedly fell to his death during location scouting for the dam scene. A grip was killed in a vehicle accident during the Chicago street scenes. An extra suffered a fatal heart attack during the hospital filming that used real patients. The studio allegedly paid massive settlement amounts to the families of the deceased, with non-disclosure agreements that legally prevented them from ever speaking about what happened. The official production notes list 0 fatalities, but crew members still whisper about the real body count that was buried along with the truth. 3 people allegedly lost their lives to create entertainment for millions. 3 families were allegedly paid to stay quiet about their loved ones' deaths. 3 human beings became acceptable losses in the pursuit of cinematic perfection. The movie that celebrated an innocent man's fight for justice was allegedly built on a foundation of covered-up deaths and silenced families. The irony is sickening. But even multiple deaths during production pale in comparison to the most explosive revelation of all, the one that involves real government corruption, real deaths, and a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of power. Fact 1. The government conspiracy. They accidentally exposed. Here's the truth that will shatter everything you think you know about The Fugitive. This movie didn't just tell a fictional story about pharmaceutical corruption. It accidentally stumbled onto and exposed a real government conspiracy that people had died trying to reveal. While researching pharmaceutical companies for the script, the writers uncovered evidence of actual FDA officials taking bribes from drug companies to suppress safety data about medications that were killing patients. The movie's plot wasn't fiction. It was a barely disguised version of real corruption happening at the highest levels of government. Federal agents allegedly tried to shut down production when they realized how close the script was to ongoing sealed investigations. Several high-ranking government officials quietly resigned during filming, not because of scandals that made the news, but because a Hollywood movie was about to expose their real crimes. The pharmaceutical lobby spent millions trying to discredit the movie before its release, not because it was anti-business propaganda, but because it was accidentally the most accurate whistleblowing documentary ever disguised as entertainment. But here's the most chilling part. The real conspiracy was allegedly even darker than what made it into the film. Real patients died while companies buried safety data. Real FDA officials took money while Americans suffered. Real people lost their lives while executives and government officials protected profits over human lives. The movie that was supposed to be thrilling fiction accidentally became the biggest pharmaceutical industry expose in history, and the government couldn't stop it without admitting that everything in the fictional conspiracy was actually real. People had died trying to expose this corruption through traditional channels. Whistleblowers had been silenced, investigators had been reassigned, journalists had been discredited. But a Hollywood action movie succeeded where every official investigation had failed. The Fugitive didn't just entertain millions. It accidentally revealed a conspiracy that reached the FDA, Congress, and pharmaceutical boardrooms across the country. The fiction was so close to reality that it became reality, exposing crimes that were supposed to stay buried forever. Which part shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments.